All right. And I want to tell you, Guy probably does read more about Bitcoin than anyone I know.
I do.
I give him a hard time. Hey, also I want to let you guys know, walking around you see you guys with red shirts with a video camera and a regular camera. Those are my guys. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. Will never go anywhere. We'll probably make some kind of thing that we can use for next year's event here out of some of that stuff, and I'll be careful with the red orange. If you have questions, please use the microphone up there. I want to thank Mike Clear, volunteered to work this whole thing all day doing the screens, the shots, and the PowerPoints. So I want to give him a big round of applause. He's a great guy. I'm also really wondering why no one has been impressed with my Bitcoin shoes. I mean, you know, I really to Jose Nino, a Bitcoin wallet going to John Carpenter, a BitBlockBoom t-shirt to Abel Stein's, C-plate by Coinbase to Ryan.
It includes a full node so you can validate your own transactions, and it's typically self-hosted so that it's censorship resistant, meaning that if someone's going to shut down the server, hopefully that's you and not someone else. So BTC Pay server, explain like I'm 5. So you create a node, or BTC Pay creates a node when you deploy it. You connect your wallet, and then you create apps which produce invoices, and payments go to your wallet. And that's it. Super easy, right? So you just deployed your server. We'll just do a really quick walkthrough of what it looks like. So in case you're thinking about deploying a BTC Pay server and you haven't done it yet, I'm just going to run through really quickly what you kind of see. So this is the login screen that everyone sees, and you're in. And then the next thing you do is you can create apps. So I just pressed create a new app. I've already connected my wallet, and I added a title. I put a picture in and a description, and now I have a crowdfunding app. It's really that easy. You can share this as a web URL with anyone, and they can pay to your crowdfund, which is your wallet that's connected, right? So you can crowdfund your passion. You can make a point of sale app. This one is for brick and mortar or for online shops. It just depends, but it's also deployed with BTC Pay, and it's a web URL that you can share with anyone. So as long as you have a device that has a web browser capability, you can display your point of sale app. And this is the app that deploys without doing anything. So I pressed create a new app, point of sale, and this is it. So if you want to change the title, you want to change the products, you can do that. It's really easy. Next up is payment requests. So this is like you want someone to pay you. So I made a simple one where you want to collect rent from someone. And you can also share this too. So next, here are some invoices of BTC Pay. So this is how you collect money, is the invoice. And the invoice in BTC Pay is like, I like to call it like the gold standard, right? Like when you see the invoice and it looks like BTC Pay, it's like kind of looks legit, and they're super customizable, but they always kind of have that similar look. And BTC Pay invoices are a reliable form of, or a reliable way to accept Bitcoin payments. And so this is how you get money into your wallet. So next, you can manage all your payments in BTC Pay server, and you can label them, you can sort them, you can add notes for them. So it's really a typical payment managing and a normal sort of thing, but it has a little bit more capability in terms of ordering and filtering all your payments and labeling them. So it's sort of next level in comparison to like your regular wallet UI. You can also do Lightning management. So this is Ride the Lightning, which is included by default in BTC Pay server if you have Lightning enabled. This is a hot pink mode that I liked so much and told them how much I liked it that they kept it just for me. So hopefully other people will also tell them that you love it, the hot pink mode. But yeah, it's just deployed automatically for you. You know, you don't have to do crazy stuff to get Lightning capability. So that's pretty much it. Like that's the 2-minute walkthrough of BTC Pay. Like now you have a BTC Pay, you've done like all the basics, right? Next question is, so why is BTC Pay not for everyone? Is the real question. So first of all, you don't know what an XPub is. You don't care what it is. You don't want to know. You don't want to learn about software, which is fine. Not everybody wants to go down the rabbit hole of that, you know? You don't ever want to be on the command line. That's like not a place you ever want to be. Also fine, totally cool. DNS and domain names. This is kind of a barrier to entry in BTC Pay because you have to kind of, you know, understand what an A name record is, or a C name record, or what an IP address is, and not everybody wants to do that. True story. You don't care about paying fees. You don't mind. You're super rich. You have so much money, and you don't mind paying payment processing fees. BTC Pay is free, so there's a little bit of extra work that you have to do, which we're just going down the list. But you get a free payment processor. And it doesn't have KYC. And it doesn't have AML regulations. But if you don't care about those things, then that's fine. You can validate your own transactions, meaning you don't have to rely on anyone else. And it's censorship resistant. So let's talk about why someone might prefer using BTC Pay and what it means if you just want to pay someone else. Like maybe you don't want to do any of those things. You don't want to do the XPub and the DNS. That's fine. Maybe you need to pay someone to do it, right? Or you just don't use it, right? Use OpenNode. They're great guys. It's a good project. We all want Bitcoin to succeed. We want Bitcoin tools. They're our friends. We love payment processing. So do they. So you prefer someone to do it for you. You need some help for key and wallet management. Not everyone is going to do multi-sig wallet key management in BTC Pay or want to know how to do it. And that's okay. There are highly trained people in the Bitcoin space who are totally willing and capable to do that for you. You don't like to read docs and you don't like to figure out your use case. There are so many ways to accept Bitcoin in BTC Pay server. I just went over about 4 or 5 in the last just 3 minutes, but there are many more. So understanding your use case, whether you're just doing a WooPress integration with your WordPress website, or you're just making like a donation page and you just need the one button custom amount, donation for your Twitter, whatever. Like, understanding what your use case is maybe like 10% of the process. You also don't like to restart and update your server. So that's the command line. Like, it's not that hard, but it happens. So if you don't want to do that, you might want to pay someone else to do it. IP and hostname setup. If you need something ASAP, right? Like, you have your conference tomorrow, or you have your dinner tomorrow. Like, you can set up other processing services very quickly. But BTC Pay has a little bit of legwork, right? You have to deploy the server. You, of course, have to sync the blockchain, which takes a few days. If you want to do some Lightning stuff, you need to do the liquidity and opening channels with people. It's not a 10-minute thing, right? You trust someone else's node, so that's the key, right? So if you run a BTC Pay server, you trust your own node. It's kind of like a transaction is not debunked by Snopes, right? It's like debunked by your own node. So if you don't run your own node, then you trust someone else's word. Same thing, you trust you won't be canceled is the censorship resistant. So if you are a merchant and you are running a BTC Pay server, you can add yourself to our merchant directory, which not everyone knows about the merchant directory, but if you do have a business and you're using BTC Pay, add yourself, because there are, I think there's over 100 merchants. I'm not exactly sure of the total, but it's a good way to get yourself out there. And if you do want to spend your Bitcoin, or you know people who like to do that, please send them to our directory website and add yourself, because we are trying to make a mini circular economy, because we are in contact with a lot of merchants just naturally. So I'm not a merchant. Why do I care? This is a really common question, and I don't have the answer that will be the same for everyone. But long story short, it's an easy way to set up a Bitcoin node. It's an easy way to set up a Lightning node, no command line. If you're deploying the server, it comes included. So if you haven't used Lightning because it's too hard, or you haven't really done the full node thing because it's too hard, like, deploy a BTC Pay server. Like, you'll have a node and you can brag about it on Twitter and to all your friends, and it's super easy. You can learn about Bitcoin, you can learn about software and web development. If you have a BTC Pay server, it's kind of inevitable that you'll learn a little bit about technology and software, and web development too, right? You can make a WordPress website. We have guides to make your very first WordPress website, to deploy your own BTC Pay server and add it as a payment integration. So if you've never made your own WordPress or e-commerce and you want to just learn something, check us out. And also if you want to get paid in Bitcoin. If you are kind of more like the altruistic person and you don't really care about making an online business to sell like keychains or something, you can start a consulting business, right? Like, if you like BTC Pay server and you're good at key management, like I was mentioning before, there are a lot of people who will pay you to do that for them. And there are a lot of people who will pay you to just set up a WordPress. So, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants in open source. So if you like open source and you enjoy learning, you can leverage that and use the things that others have built. We're all trying to contribute to the space. It's not a bad thing. We all are working together. So consider consulting business, contributing to open source. And you can also process payments for others. So if you have a BTC Pay server, we call them third-party hosts. But you can process payments for your friends or your family. Community and networking is really big in BTC Pay. There's an online chat, and we all are friends and hang out and share memes. So if you're feeling cooped up in quarantine world, come and join us. So if you're already using BTC Pay server, a new feature to watch out for is pull payments. Pull payments in BTC Pay are going to allow subscription services and freelancer billing. This is kind of like for the power users here. I hope there are some. But essentially, it's also refunds too, which BTC Pay did not have before. And it's similar to, in a normal transaction, you pay someone. And if you want to do that, you have to say, OK, give me your address, right? Well, this would be the opposite. So I give you a BTC Pay request for payment to someone, and then at their convenience, they can pull money from it. So it's a little bit different than a regular push payment is what we call it. But yeah, this a little bit of an issue in BTC Pay of the naming, because we have a lot of like very, very technical people coming up with very technical names. So if you're a names person, come join us so we can make things more clear. So yeah, find out more. We have really good documentation. Someone asked me last night, will I be able to use the docs and deploy a server? And I said, yes. And if you can't, come into the chat, which is the third one down, and let me know where you're stuck, because I'm also writing the documentation. So if I should improve it, let me know. Blog articles for how to get started and projects that can get your feet wet in BTC Pay. And of course, the merchant directory that I showed you. So that's just the rundown. I hope that I gave a good explanation of BTC Pay and why you might want to use it and why you might also want to just pay someone else to set it up for you, which is also OK too. Does anyone have any questions about BTC Pay or what we're trying to do with the project and why so many people are excited to contribute to this open source project for free with our own free time, pretty much? OK, if you have a question, can you please go to the mic to ask the question?
Hi, Britt. Thank you very much. BTC Pay server is in my future. In the beginning, you talked about the apps, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that BTC Pay server has the ability to produce new addresses constantly. But you didn't say that, and I was just curious, how is that functionality in there at all times, that new addresses can constantly be created at either end, and that refund thing, same kind of thing, so that we're not reusing addresses? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. That is one of the fundamental features of BTC Pay Server, is that there is no such thing as address reuse. So a lot of times you'll see like the static address on people's websites, like donate here, XYZ, and it's been their address for like a million years. And personally, I don't really like to donate to those addresses because of the address reuse. So in BTC Pay Server, your wallet is connected using the infamous XPub key, and your BTC Pay will derive a new address for each invoice. And so refunds, pull payments, any invoice in BTC Pay is always a new address. There's no such thing as address reuse in BTC Pay.
OK, say you want to set up a point of sale in a brick and mortar, but you don't want that to be on the internet, to DNS. Can you set it up local host, but still have your local network on the blockchain?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do that with like Raspberry Pi and stuff. Yeah, if you don't want it to be public to the world, but you still want to use it, yeah, that's like you're going to want to be exploring in the Raspberry Pi kind of hardware devices. So you can read about doing that kind of like networking with BTC Pay setup in the hardware section.
Awesome. So I don't really have a question, but I just want to say that I used BTC Pay server for the first time a couple days ago to make a purchase, and I just want to say what you guys are doing is so incredibly important, and the process of making that payment was so seamless that I think that BTC Pay server is literally one of the most important projects in Bitcoin right now in terms of payments.
Awesome, thanks.
I just have a quick question. I set up BTC Pay server one time and I noticed I had to open some ports. I was wondering, for the more privacy-oriented people, do you guys have a Tor-only option for your deployment?
Tor-only deployment, I do not think exists like you're thinking. Tor is enabled by default, so it's accessible using Tor by default when you deploy it. But there is not by default like an environment variable to set it as like Tor only. Gotcha. But it is enabled by default. But also, if you are using, I believe, Firefox, it will tell you like this is available over Tor anytime you're in BTC Pay UI to alert people. So yeah, I wanted to end it short and sweet, and that's BTC Pay Server. I hope that most of you here have heard of it, and if you haven't, I hope that this has convinced you to give it a try. And like I said, if you want to get started and you're not sure like which use case is yours, do come into the chat and find me or just ask. And we're happy to help you because we're just hanging out in there, and we love to talk about BTC Pay like I do, obviously. So come find us, and thanks to everyone for supporting our open source project.
Okay, everybody, thanks a lot. And just want to let everyone know, in case you want to post it, the live stream is now live at BitBlockBoom if you want to post it so people can watch it. Hey, see this guy here? This is Chris Chrismos. He runs PodFest, one of the larger podcast conferences in Texas and Florida. And he flew in just to clean this microphone and stuff. So I want to give him a big round of applause. Next year, Britt's going to help me get the BTC Pay server set up on BitBlockBoom, so we're using that next year. So I want to let everybody know that. Now, our next speaker is Jimmy Song, but we do have a 10-minute break. And so relax, get some water, do whatever you want to, and go to the restrooms, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Great job, Gary.
Thanks. And I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Andrew?
Andrew, and I felt bad asking. I was hoping it'd come to me. But there's a point in time where you finally go, it's not going to come to me, I just need to ask.
I completely understand.
yo. Okay, we're back, session 3. I hope you enjoyed your break. Hey, okay, everybody, I want to, first of all, I want to thank Andrew Telfer for working this clock. I know you guys don't know it, but he's might be the hardest working guy here right now, working that little time clock there. So thank you, Al. And I also want to thank, if you guys look in your bag, you'll see a couple of these cards that Surfer Jim put in there. And these cards are meant to give away. And they have all the resources he could think of for people who want to find out about Bitcoin. So if you see these in your bag, don't throw them away and say, I know all that. Put them in your pocket and give them to someone that you're like trying to tell about Bitcoin, okay? And I've got some more of these I'm going to find somewhere, but there's definitely some in everybody's bag. So I'll make sure everybody knew that. And I appreciate Surfer Jim taking the time to do that. That was very kind to him. We'll announce some winners real quick. A Bit Piggy for Ben Carmen. A Bit Piggy polo shirt. They're kind of nice, actually, for Kelly Lannon. A BitBlockBOOM t-shirt for Heather Havenwood. A Sats Ledger for Jason Mills. And a Trust but Verified Cat for Paul Zemmer. Those are all waiting for you at the t-shirt shop. And I want to introduce Jimmy Song now. Before I introduce him, I want you to know, when I started getting into Bitcoin in 2017, first thing I did was start a podcast. I knew nothing about Bitcoin at all. And I think like the 4th show, I called Jimmy and said, Jimmy, would you come on my show? And he's like, sure. And I mean, I was such an idiot back then, but Jimmy didn't care. He had a chance to talk about Bitcoin and help share the word. So this is a great guy here, and he's come every year and helped. So this is Jimmy Song with the moral case for Bitcoin. Give it up.
All right, let's see if my slides are back. All right, great. Thanks for coming. I am going to talk today about the moral case for Bitcoin. We've made a lot of arguments in favor of Bitcoin. We've made the investment case for Bitcoin. We've made the individual self-sovereign case for Bitcoin. We've even made the societal case for Bitcoin. What we haven't done is given a moral case for Bitcoin. And I think this is a very important part of what we're doing as Bitcoiners, because what we need is the moral high ground. And if we can convince people from a moral high ground, I think this will be, it'll get more people to adopt and so on. So we're going to talk about the moral case for Bitcoin, and I'm going to do it in these. So first, we're going to talk about individual rights. There are 2 theories of individual rights that we'll cover. This is individual rights from a natural law perspective and positivism. Second thing we're going to talk about is government's role. It's going to be about individual liberty versus an elitist vision. And we'll talk about what that is a little bit. Then we'll get to fiat versus Bitcoin and how those, both of those relate to the previous 2. What is its stance on individual rights and and the role of government. And finally, no talk on a moral case for Bitcoin would be complete without talking something about virtue, or what it means to have better character and so on. And we'll talk about the incentives around those in that last section. And I titled it "Bitcoin Fixes This" because fiat has corrupted character in ways that we do not fully appreciate. All right, so let's get started. Natural law versus positivism. And what we're going to talk about here is the theory of rights. And there are 2 main theories. The first is the theory of natural law. This is the idea that rights are something we already have, and that if they're violated by anyone, including government, that it is a violation of moral law. So this is a passage from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is from the Declaration of Independence. The reason why the colonists felt like they couldn't declare independence was because they felt like their natural rights were being violated by England, right? That the English king was violating their natural rights, and therefore it was not a legitimate government. That was their argument, okay? That's the basis of natural law. We already have these rights, and if you violate them, then you are an illegitimate government. Now, the other view is something called positivism, and this is the idea that the government gives you rights that the government gives you things that you can and cannot do, and that rights are not legitimate unless the government explicitly gives them to you. So this is a good example. If you can give someone a haircut at home, but if you want to get paid for it, you have to get a license permission. Somebody has to say from government, from the authority, and they are the arbiter of morality. That is the positivist view of morality, or of rights. So why would people like natural law? Well, I mean, first of all, it's common sense, right? And that was one of the tracks from the Spirit of '76 was Thomas Paine's Common Sense. It's just very intuitive. Natural law is intuitive. Okay, it's wrong to kill people, right, with no reason, things like that. It's also fairly just and universal. It's very easy to say, okay, this person violated this person's rights, and it's fair to people. And finally, it is individual-centric because you are protecting each individual's natural rights. They have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and other things. And it's attractive for those reasons. Now, why would anyone like positivism? Well, it's people in power. First, it's much easier to enforce, right? Positivism says if you are not given that right, then you are in violation, right? If you don't have a license to cut someone's hair, then you are in violation if you are collecting payment for that. And therefore, it makes enforcement much, much easier. With natural law, you get new technologies and stuff like that. Do you have the right to privacy on a device that's on the cloud and things like that? It's very hard to figure out. And it requires a lot of thought and a lot of jurisprudence in order to figure out. With positivism, it's very easy for the authorities to enforce because it either is or it isn't in violation of the rights that they've given you. And that means that they have the right, more or less, to change the scales of justice. They can say, okay, well, we're going to treat these people differently than these people, and this is very convenient for those in power. And it's very beneficial to bureaucrats because they get to set the rules. They get to say, okay, do. And you have no recourse because we get to set the rules. There's no higher authority that you can appeal to and say this is unfair. So that's natural law versus positivism. And at this point, I want you to recognize that natural law is moral, positivism is highly immoral. And in fact, if you look throughout history, all of the worst governments with the worst atrocities, every single one of them was positivist. The state gives you the right to do something. The state gives you the right to do X, Y, or Z. And they take stuff like your right to life, your right to liberty, your right to pursue happiness. And that's one of the things that they end up doing with the power that they have. So if you're a believer in positivism, you can sort of stop the talk right now. I don't really have anything more to say to you. But if you're a believer in natural law, let's go on. Let's talk about the role of government. Because there are two possible roles of government, individual liberty versus an elitist vision. And according to the Declaration of Independence, it's all about individual liberty, right? The government's job is to make sure that you protect the rights of individuals. We'll talk about elitist vision, but this is more or less the difference. It's leave us alone versus take care of us all, right? Some vision that you might have. And I realize that this slide makes it look like conservatives are good and liberals are bad. Not the case at all. You'll see in the next slide, conservatives are not spared at all. All right, so here are some possible elitist visions that governments can have. Workers, paradise, something like that, right? This is the Marxist vision. Or a racially pure community, right? That's the Nazi vision, or whatever. These are elitist visions, and this is a way in which those in power try to enforce their vision onto the populace. Another one, safety, right? This is how we get ridiculous things like the TSA. It's a vision of, okay, we need to make sure that things are safe, so these are the things that we're going to do about it. This, by the way, tends to come from the conservative side. Social justice. We're going to have equal outcomes for everyone for any particular thing. And of course, probably the worst violation, oftentimes, is keeping things the way they are, right? The vision of keeping they are therefore immoral. Now, what are the consequences of enhancing individual liberty? If government does its job of protecting individuals, their natural law rights? Well, first of all, there's a lot more entrepreneurship because you don't need permission anymore, right? Like you can go do whatever, and it's something that you have a right to do without getting permission from somebody else that might violate somebody else's elitist vision. And that leads to virtue. This is a painting of the 4 cardinal virtues. This is prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. I'll have more to say about that later. And all of that means that people get to build what they want. And this is how civilization builds, is that when people build what they want, you end up making lots of stuff. And you end up creating civilization. Now, the consequences of an elitist vision is that they are trying to take society to a particular place. And that means that there's some permission required. There always needs to be some sort of bureaucratic stamp of approval on whatever it is that you want to do. And if you violate that, well, they're not going to let you. They're going to fine you, they're going to imprison you, take away your individual sovereignty. And that means that there's less virtue, ultimately, for individuals, because you're not incentivized to do all of these. It's hard to be an entrepreneur, right? And you need prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude. You need all of those things to be a successful one. But if you have another standard besides the market, then you're going to have different incentives. And that's essentially what happens when you have an elitist vision that everyone has to subscribe to. And ultimately, that means that we become slaves to the state. Right? When the government has the duty of protecting individual liberty, then the state becomes servant to the people. But when there's an elitist vision that they are trying to promote or to go towards, then we become the slaves of the state. Right? That's the big difference here. If you're protecting individual liberty, the state is your servant. If it's an elitist vision, then you are its servant. And those are the two competing visions of government. And you can see right now that we've gone pretty much from the spirit of '76, which was all about protecting individual liberty, to the point where we're in an elitist vision kind of place. Right now, the elitist vision of most governors is to protect the spread of COVID, or to stop the pandemic. And they are trampling all over our individual liberties in order to do so. So what does this have to do with Bitcoin? Well, this is where fiat money and Bitcoin sort of collide, because in a sense, a lot of it is about power, right? And with fiat money, you have a centralized place, right? This is the Fed. They get to control everything. And if you think about it, it's very much a positivist money. They tell you whether or not you can have money. They tell you whether, can I have some money, sir, right? Like we have to ask permission to keep it. Bitcoin, the power is decentralized. It's much more about individual liberty. Property, the state can take it away at any time. This is a positivist vision of money. It's not about individual liberty at all. It's they can take it whenever they want. What Bitcoin allows is for you to have even stronger property rights than anything that we've seen in existence because it is not physical. That means that they can't seize your gold, even if they, because there's nothing physical to seize. It can be in your brain. And that means that it's much more akin to a belief. And that's a picture of a martyr being stoned. In that way, you can kill the martyr, but you're not going to change that person's beliefs. And Bitcoin is very much in that same realm. You don't have to give it up if you don't want to. That's individual liberty. That's protecting our individual rights. There's also production. With fiat money, they can take the fruits of your labor away from you, and this often happens through inflation. And what's even worse about inflation is that it does not require the consent of the governed. And that, of course, is also from the Declaration of Independence. You need the consent of the governed. At least explicit taxation requires consent of the governed. You have to pass a law. With inflation, you don't have to do any of that. You just print more money, and you're seizing value from everyone else. With Bitcoin, all of that value goes to the individual, and you can have capital accumulation. They get to keep the fruits of their labor, and it is way more just. The posture of fiat money is that of violence. It's a zero-sum game. You have to force people, right? This is the elitist vision again. We are its slave. It is a slave money, right? With Bitcoin, it has a posture of voluntary trade. You do things because people agree. And that is much more moral because it's consensual. It's not forced. So to sum it up here, fiat money is a positivist money. It's an elitist vision money. Bitcoin is aligned with the moral law. It enhances individual liberty. That's why it's moral. And I said before that I would have more to say about virtue, and here it is. We're going to talk about those 4 virtues, the classical virtues that go all the way back to Aristotle. These are the 4 cardinal virtues. And no talk about morality would be complete without talking about virtue in some way. So there's prudence. Prudence is the idea, well, we in Bitcoin call it low time preference, but that's essentially what it is. It's the idea that you are planning for the future, that you are not just throwing away today. Right now with fiat money, you have enormous amounts of debt. A lot of people have high time preference. And that means that they become slaves to their debt. Bitcoin doesn't allow for this, right? In order to take on debt, it costs a lot more. And you end up having a much lower time preference, meaning that you end up with more prudence. Temperance. So in a fiat system, consumption is encouraged like crazy because you need the circular flow of money. And what you end up getting is people that are not very good at controlling themselves and doing things to excess, right? This is everything from materialism to eating too many donuts to binge watching things and things like that. Temperance is this idea that you do things the right amount. And that is not encouraged at all by fiat money. With Bitcoin, this comes back because this is something that gets rewarded by the market instead of the current system that we have. There's justice. There's a lot of rent seeking that happens in a fiat economy. Right? And this is a good picture of it. Lobbying will get you so many rent-seeking opportunities and put barriers to competition and so on. With Bitcoin, what you get is the elimination of a lot of these rent-seeking opportunities. And that means that things are more just because all rent-seeking is in some way theft. It's unjust. It's taking value that doesn't belong to you. The final one is fortitude. And fortitude, you can use words like courage or guts or something like that. That's what that means. And the sad reality of a fiat social elitist vision kind of society is that it gets highly politicized because the government is in control of everything. There are competing visions usually. And that's what most of fighting about politics is all about. It's fighting for different visions of the future. And what fortitude does, and that means that you don't have a chance to really exercise fortitude per se. It's not that brave to stand with lots of other people that believe the same things as you, or to be in an echo chamber or something like that. And what you get are riots and things. This is destruction, right? This is not courage. This is not fortitude. This is just doing what everyone else is doing. This requires all the courage of a bully. Instead, with Bitcoin, you get real fortitude. That's being an entrepreneur. That is taking risk and trying something that might or might not work with the risk of failure. That's real virtue. And that's what we get with Bitcoin. So ultimately, my argument for the moral case for Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is that which aligns with natural law. It's what gives us protection for our individual rights. Because right now, we are headed towards a tyrannical state. And we can see it happening all around us. Every state in the world is becoming more and more tyrannical, more and more about the vision that they have instead of protecting individual liberty, especially in the last 6 months. The moral case for Bitcoin is that fiat is a positivist money. It's a tool of the state. And to be able to opt out of that is a moral imperative. Fiat Delenda. Thank you. We have some time for some questions. There's a mic in the back if you want to ask some questions. And please go ahead and ask. Okay, yeah. Okay. I might have finished my talk a little early because I misread the clock, but that's okay. Yeah, all right, there's somebody coming up. Hey, Derek.
Jimmy. Okay, I think a lot of people understand rent-seeking behavior, but some people don't. Would you define that, please?
Yeah, sure. So rent-seeking, as I define it, is being in the middle of a transaction and taking sort of a cut of the transaction without providing anything. So this is, think like government bureaucrat that has to rubber stamp stuff. They're not adding any actual value, but you have to pay them some tax in order to do that, right? You know, they claim to be licensors or regulators or something like that, but oftentimes they're just rent-seeking. They're taxing the transaction without providing any value. And this is essentially theft of value from the parties that actually are trading. And it's getting in the middle of it. They essentially become kind of like a trusted third party in Bitcoin parlance.
Thank you, Jimmy. Very inspiring. Can you look into your crystal ball? I know you have one. And you know, see where we've gone the last, whatever it is, 5 months, and where are we headed? And is there any examples from any countries, maybe in South America, that have already taken this path?
Headed in what manner? Like with respect to Bitcoin or something?
With respect to tyranny and money.
Yeah, I mean, the clear trend in the last 5 months is towards positivism, or that view of the world, which is that the government gives you the right to do something, right? The freedom of assembly is encoded into the Constitution. The fact that a lot of governors are saying, no, you can't assemble anymore, that's a violation of our natural rights. That's a natural right that they are violating by saying that we can't. Instead, it's their view that they can give you this right, that you don't have this right unless they first allow you to have it. That's a positivist view. And the thing about positivist views is that they are the most tyrannical in history. Every single government that's done enormous evil. If you look at them, they had a positivist view. Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, Mao's China, Pol Pot, all of it's, we give you the right to life. We give you the right to liberty. We give you the right to property and happiness. That was their view, and therefore they felt justified in taking people's lives, taking people's liberty, taking people's property. That's how they thought of it. The sad thing is technology has only enhanced the state's power to sort of enforce their elitist vision. And they're competing visions, surely, but the trend towards positivism has been kind of continuous, and especially strong over the last 5 months, 6 months. It's governors are thinking that they have rights that they don't, that they have powers that they don't. And if you believe in natural law, as I do, that we have these rights already, then that is a profoundly immoral thing to do.
Hey, yeah, thanks for your talk. It was really good. This might just be more of a terminology question about positivism, but I'm familiar with that term from like philosophy of science, like the logical positivists. Is that a connection?
Yeah, so it comes from like empiricism and stuff, and that's usually how it's justified with respect to science and so on. So it's not a coincidence, for example, that socialism claims to be a scientific economic science or something like that. When you think about rights, it cannot be empirically proven. That's the idea. You have to believe in something else in order to believe that you have natural rights. But it's kind of unworkable to not believe in natural rights because then if you're a positivist, then the state can take your life anytime they want for any reason, because as long as they pass a law to do so, or that they have the will to do so. They can jail you for whatever reason. Like the Declaration of Independence does not make sense if you have a positivist view. It's completely against the spirit of 76, because it would say, well, okay, well, the government has the right to jail me or kill me because they're the government and they're the ultimate moral authority. If you believe that there's that there's a higher moral authority than that you do have rights that exist outside of the auspices of government, then natural law is pretty much what you have to believe, whether or not you believe in God or not. Obviously, the signers of the Declaration of Independence did, but you don't have to. But that's the idea, is that you cannot come up with a moral system that is purely based on empiricism without that's not positivist, and it's profoundly morally unjustified, and I think it's pretty clear why.
Hey Jimmy, so this talk really hit a chord with me. I'm originally from Venezuela, and I saw single-handedly and witnessed what a socialist government does to a country. Venezuela went from being literally one of the wealthiest countries in South America to being a failed state in less than 20 years because of socialist principles. My question to you is, now in the recent political environment, why do you think that there's such a large portion of the population in the United States that are attracted to this failed ideology?
Yeah, it's a great question. Why are people attracted essentially by this elitist vision, right? Like of socialism in particular, but almost any elitist vision. Usually it's in the interest of those in power to promote whatever elitist vision that they have. And this is the false dichotomy of politics right now. It's one side says we need to keep things exactly the way they are. This is the status quo, kind of like conserve everything. Everything needs to stay exactly the same. And then the other side is much more about, okay, here's a world that we can imagine that we think would be much better than now, and this is what we all have to work towards. Neither of those are right. they both violate our individual liberty. And the fact of the matter is, when you get a lot of marketing dollars, essentially, towards one vision or the other, you can do a lot of things. We're taught in school a lot of this stuff, and it's been sort of socially approved and so on. It's part of conventional wisdom. We've been indoctrinated to believe those things because it's in the interest of those in power. Hopefully that answers your question.
One quick question. There are a couple different ways you can sort of arrive at the concept of inalienable rights. And I'm curious, and this might be like too personal for the forum, but what's kind of your personal formulation? Is it more of sort of like it being an incredibly powerful social construct, or is it more just like a naturally or like divinely endowed sort of set?
Well, I can say this pretty freely. I'm a Christian, so I believe in God, and I believe that He endowed us with natural rights. Now, you don't have to believe that in order to believe in natural rights. In fact, Hans Hermann Hoppe has written, I think, a very eloquent reasoning for why natural rights exist. And it's from a completely non-divine perspective. It's, okay, we argue, therefore, that you sort of assume that I have the right to my body, and therefore all these other things. And it's very logically thought out and provided. But for me personally, it's because I believe in a creator.
Cool. Thank you.
It's a quick question. We have like natural rights as human beings. If those are endowed from some sort of inherent, faculty or quality of us, what natural rights exist for non-humans?
Non-humans.
It doesn't make sense to me to just stop natural rights of human beings, like we're some sort of special snowflake in the universe. Like animals or trees or anything else. Does everything have a natural right? Or why would we say that they don't, if not?
I gotta be honest, I really haven't thought about that question until just now. But my instinct is that yes, they do, because I don't think it's right to like torture a dog, for example. So they probably have some natural right to life or something like that. And it might be different depending on the level of the animal or something, but I am sure that lots of other thinkers have written down what they think, and I would probably read those before I form an opinion.
And then the follow-up if we look in nature, outside of society, it seems like life depends on the violation of the natural rights of others in some ways. Whether you're chasing down a prey to eat, to survive, you're violating the natural rights of that entity or that individual. Where and I'm not saying it's moral to kill somebody, obviously, but like, where do we formulate that justification? Why it's okay for me to kill a cow, but not okay for me to kill a human being?
Yeah, so that's where your previous question definitely applies. So I haven't thought that deeply about that particular thing. So again, I'll defer, I'll punt the question for now, but that's something that I promise to think about, and we'll come back to you maybe next year and talk about. So I think we're out of time, but thank you for your questions. Would be happy to talk about any of that. I am working on a book similar to this. If you want to talk about it, yeah, that's there too.
And I know we limit the time on the questions, but these guys are here all day. This isn't like some giant conference. You don't get a chance to ask them questions. That's why we limit them. But I also want to give out the next set of awards. BitPiggy to Justin Hoddle. Cold Card to Dan Carmen. Inventing Bitcoin book to Clancy Rogers. A Bitcoin bag to Phil Gibson. Trust but Verified Cat to Katie Anarana. And I know I pronounced your last name wrong, so I apologize. Next up, we have Will Cole on the future of Multisig. Oh, and there he is. Thanks, Will.
Got it. Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Is it working? All right. So, waiting for the slides here. Well, I'll do my introduction then, just the slides are here. I'm Will Cole. I work at Unchained Capital. And this is really exciting for me. I think it's been almost 9 years now that I've been interested in and paying attention to Bitcoin, and this is my very first ever Bitcoin conference. I couldn't be happier to be here with y'all. And because it's my very first Bitcoin conference, I decided to make it really easy on myself and talk about multisig, because that's really easy to explain to a giant audience. And I've heard before, I'm going to try to stay away from the dreaded, 10-minute descriptions of Xpubs. I'll spend like 2 minutes on it. But my goal. How are we doing here? That's fine. Does anyone have any questions? Multisig, y'all got it? Okay, here we go. My goals today are that I want to convince you that a lot of you don't know very much about multisig, but it's very early in its adoption curve, and that you're not behind. And I know that the title of the talk was The Future of Multisig. That's just because I was really, really late in being added to the speakers here. I think Parker Lewis sent in the title of my talk, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So we're doing the present of multisig. And I want to convince you that there's one very unintuitive thing about multisig that will save you a lot of headaches. And it was certainly something that I wish I had known 2 years ago when I started looking into this. And I also want to convince you that one of the benefits of multisig is the idea that you can collaborate with other people with your information, and it is still safe and compatible with trust minimization in Bitcoin. So instead of asking all of you to dox yourselves and do the thing that speakers do sometimes, which is raise your hand if, I was going to say, single sig, raise your hand if you're just using single, that's not going to work. So instead I did the next best thing, and I put out a poll on Twitter. And the main thing to take away from this is that the good news is a lot of people have made the decision, and this is backed up by a lot of other research, this is not scientific after all, that a lot of people have made the decision to leave centralized exchanges. There's a lot of self-sovereign Bitcoin holders in this poll. The problem I see is that there's not as many people using multisig as I think should be. And I think that is mostly because people don't understand how it works. And further, I got into the DMs with people that were answering this poll, and they told me as much. So the reasons people weren't, I asked them directly, why aren't you using multisig? We're in this conversation. And around 25% of the people I asked said they understand it, they kind of like it, but they haven't gotten around to it, right? There's a lot of inertia in the way that we store our Bitcoin, where it is inconvenient or terrifying to move from something that we consider safe where nothing bad has happened to something new. That's about a quarter of the people. About 30% are people that just weren't convinced that they needed to use multisig. They were happy. This is usually people that were in a single sig situation, whether it be hardware wallets, paper wallets, something like that. And they claimed that they understood it, but didn't really think that they needed it. Then when I brought up the types of scenarios we'll go through later, some of them changed their mind on the spot. And close to the majority, but not quite, just don't know how it works. And I would argue that many of the people that I ended up talking to in the first two buckets also didn't know how it works, or else they probably would have switched. So we're going to answer a lot of these questions on how it works. So to start out with, what is multisig actually protecting you from? All of these things combined can be summed up in one phrase. They're protecting you from single points of failure. The entire purpose of having multiple keys is to stop the idea that one mistake could lose all of your Bitcoin. Now, those central points of failure are very different. Are we on Wi-Fi? It's okay. The dreaded wrench attack, right? It doesn't matter if you're carrying it on your phone or you're carrying it on a cold card. If someone comes up to you with a wrench or a gun, they're going to get it from you, right? from trusted third parties like banks. This is a place where if they get your password, that you're potentially compromised just from that little bit of information leaking out or being stolen. And I think the most common one is just yourself, just human error, right? If you have one shot to keep something secure, and it is secured in a single point of failure, it is very easy for you to be fallible and make a mistake. Are y'all seeing what I'm seeing? Yeah. Ooh, no one's manning the slide. Just click X, we're good. Will I define multisig? Yeah, I'm going to, yeah, sort of. And if I don't, then you can ask the question at the end and I really failed. While they're doing this, yeah, I'll give a quick definition of multisig just to help out. What I mean by multisig is sort of Bitcoin's native multisig. It's not something that any company invented. It's native to the protocol, which allows you to use multiple private keys and by extension multiple public keys to generate addresses that require multiple private keys to sign to spend from those addresses, right? So instead of having a single key, a single private key, public key generates the address, one private key can sign for that address and spend the money, you would need, pretty classic 2 of 3, 3 of 5, 5 of 7 of those keys in order to spend the money. So let's talk about what you actually need inside of to set up a multisig wallet. You need private keys, like I just mentioned. This is typically a hardware wallet, something like the cold card I have up here. Trezor, Ledger, there's lots of them out there now. But you need more than one, right? So depending on what type of quorum you decide to choose, 2 of 3, 3 of 5, again, it could be, you can really go nuts with this type of stuff, 2 of 2. You need multiple of them for it to be multi-sig. That's the easy part. I think that's very intuitive for almost everyone who's heard the word multi-sig before, is that I'm going to need multiple things to sign, multiple private keys. What's not as intuitive is this second piece of information that you need. It are the extended public keys, the XPubs, or pub keys, and BIP32 paths. Now that sounds kind of terrifying, but I promise, it'll make sense and it'll be easy. But one of the things that I want you to see as we go through this is that the intuitive nature of private keys and knowing that you need multiple private keys in order to sign for an address is useless if you don't have this other information. What it basically means, if you don't have the XPubs, if you don't have the BIP32 paths, you can't find the address and you don't know what you're signing for. And we'll go through those scenarios. An example of this, I'll spend very little time on this, is, and I'm probably gonna piss off a lot of the programmers in the room here when I say this, but trying to explain what a BIP32 path is, think of it like a file system, wherein you have one of these cold cards, right? Think of this as a private key generator. It's not something you hold your Bitcoin on, it's something that generates and stores your private keys. And think of a BIP32 path as kind of a file system to find that private key on these devices. So just like on a Windows machine, you have C:/folder/folder/file name. That's kind of what a BIP32 path is doing for your hardware wallet. And it'll find your private key, which will derive public keys and extended public keys, and those things combined make an address. So the best way I can think of describing it to you is like a file path. And that file path will eventually lead you down to the extended public keys. And those extended public keys are something you really need in multisig. Whether you're a 2 of 3 or a 3 of 5 or any other type of quorum, you need the combination of all. So if it's 2 of 3, you need 3. If it's 3 of 5, you need 5 of all of the XPubs in order to generate the addresses that you can ultimately sign for. Now, with that information we just talked about, private keys and sort of this wallet information, which includes BIP32 paths and XPubs, you have to store this information. This is one of the things that I think people get hung up on the most. When you compare this to a single sig situation, when you're trying to, if any of you, most of you have probably according to the poll, have probably moved over to a Trezor or a Cold Card or a Ledger. And you have to think about where you're going to keep it. Where are you going to keep your hardware? Where are you going to keep your backup seed? And in that scenario, you're thinking about securing of having two secure locations. When you think about multisig, let's take a 2 of 3 example. We're going to use 2 of 3 a lot here, so I'll stop saying that over and over. You have 3 private keys, you have 3 seed backups, and then you have the wallet info, that crucial wallet info that I mentioned before. And so if you look at this, just if you're completely self-sovereign, if you are not collaborating with anyone else, you have 7 or 8 pieces of information to secure. The good news about that, the hard thing about that is that's 7 secure locations. The good news about that is you don't really have the same sort of onus of security as you would in a single sig situation. If you lose this and you lose the backup, you're done in a single sig situation. And we'll go through a lot of scenarios where if you lose one piece of this information, or if you're attacked and they only get one, then you are actually in an okay state. But when you think about how to store this information, what I typically think of is 2 of 3 with no one collaborating with you. Yeah, you need a safety deposit box. You need a place in your home. You need a place in your sister's home and your dad's home. Maybe if you're like me, the 3rd apple tree on the left down a dirt road in Wyoming somewhere. Something like that. But if you're collaborating with someone, all of a sudden the onus on you drops. If you're 2 of 3 and you're still sovereign, you'll have 2 private keys. You'll have 2 seed backups in your wallet information. Now you're thinking about 4, 5 secure locations, not 7 or 8. It's really subjective how you store this stuff. I get this question a lot. It depends on how much you have. It depends on what maybe the jurisdiction you're in, what type of threat vectors you're facing. But typically speaking, in a multi-sig situation, something in your home, something at a safety deposit box, something in a family member's home, those types of places are geographically separated by some degree and not easily guessed by any attacker. That's good enough. And we'll see why that's good enough, where in multi-sig it might be good enough, but in single sig it's not. I've mentioned collaboration a few times, and I want to expand on that just a little bit, because even if you look up multisig, if you're Googling it and you land on the sort of Bitcoin wiki page, you'll see that one of the first benefits of multisig that is mentioned is the ability to share information with other people, to have other people help you secure your Bitcoin without giving up your own sovereignty over that Bitcoin. So if we think about the spectrum of how you could store your Bitcoin, on one hand you have fully custodial accounts. These lack transparency and control. This is keeping it on an exchange, where you don't even have the keys. And then all the way over to self-custody, maybe in a single sig situation where it kind of lacks redundancy and backups for disaster type scenarios. I think about multi-sig, especially with collaboration, is kind of in the middle, where you're still sovereign, like you would be in a single sig situation, but you're not entirely on the hook for securing every single piece of that information. The collaborative nature of it augments multi-sig by making keys easier to manage and distribute, and making all of that information, those 7, 8 pieces that you need to save, making it simpler for you to do that as an individual. So this is the part where, when I was trying to learn about multisig a couple years ago, that this is the way I wish it was described to me. Again, I'm not going to break up redeem scripts and show you which part coincide with pub keys and stuff like that. I just want to walk you through very practical scenarios of what can happen in your multisig setup if things go wrong. So practical scenario number 1. You have a 2 of 3 multisig. 1 key is compromised or lost. So what do you do in the single sig scenario? You just go to your backup, right? Multisig, not that different. If an attacker got 1 key, they can't spend, which is different from single sig, and they can't see the balance. So you don't lose the privacy nature of the amount of Bitcoin that you have. If you just lose it, The repercussions of it, again, are pretty simple. You replace the key, and you sweep the funds into the new address that you have with the new 3 keys. Practical scenario number 2, you lose 2 keys. Now, this could seem really bad in a 2 of 3 scenario. However, especially if an attacker got a hold of these. But in the attacking scenario, if they get 2 of your private keys in a 2 of 3 multisig, you would assume that they could just spend your Bitcoin. But they can't. So what's happening when they get your 2 private keys, as long as they don't have that wallet, that very crucial wallet information that I keep on talking about, they don't know where to find the Bitcoin. They have no idea what these keys are even for. They might even be looking at it and saying like, well, there's no Bitcoin on this. You know, they might not even know it's a part of a multisig quorum. So when an attacker gets 2 of your keys, they can't do anything, which is kind of an unintuitive idea when you're thinking about how to store your Bitcoin with multisig. The other thing that they can't do, even with 2 keys, is you still don't lose privacy. They still can't see your balance. That's a really nice thing. On the loss side of things, if you lose 2 keys, you have backups, just like always, right? You can go recover them, you replace those keys, you sweep your funds into a new address, you're good to go. Let's try scenario number 3, and this is where things get a little bit weirder. If the wallet information, the BIP32 paths and XPubs that I talked about, if an attacker gets a hold of that information, again, they can't spend. They don't have your private keys, so they can find the Bitcoin, they can find the address, and you do lose some privacy here because they can see the balance. However, they can't spend the coins. So lose 1 key, lose 2 keys, lose the wallet info in isolation. You're actually, I mean, you've given up something, but you're actually okay. You're not going to lose the funds. Except in a loss scenario. If an attacker gets it, but you still have a copy of it, you know, you don't necessarily you do not lose your Bitcoin. It is possible, though, in a straight up loss scenario, if you have 1 copy of that wallet information, you still have all your keys, but you've lost your BIP32 pass and you've lost your XPubs, it is possible that you won't be able to find that address again, that you won't be able to generate that wallet and have something to sign for. And this is one of those unintuitive parts of multisig that I think is really important for people to understand, is that that wallet information is just as important as those private keys, and in some ways, in lost scenarios, it's even more important than the private keys, is you need to protect this, what we call external spin stuff, but it's really the wallet configuration, the XPubs and BIP32 paths. You have to store that very, very securely. Last scenario is thinking about collaboration, right? What if a collaborator goes rogue? What if the person that you've entrusted with a piece of information in your multisig quorum does something that you don't want them to do, or just disappears and isn't available? So typically in a collaboration scenario, what you're actually giving them is one of these 2 combinations. You're either giving them just a private key to hold, right? And in that case, if they went rogue and wanted to do something bad to you, they can't spend your Bitcoin and they can't see the balance. If you give them the wallet information in addition to one of your private keys, they can't spend your Bitcoin, but they could see the balance. So that's usually what you're doing when you're collaborating in a 2 of 3 case where you're retaining sovereignty, whether it's an individual or a company. You're giving up at least 1 private key for them to secure on your behalf, which is pretty much useless for them to do anything but protect you with. And sometimes you might give them the wallet information in addition. On the loss side here, if the collaborator were to lose their stuff, let's call it just 1 private key in this scenario, exactly the same if you lost one. It's very easy. You replace the key, you sweep funds into the new quorum, and you're safe. So most of the scenarios that we went through are, going through stuff and saying you're fine. It's pretty robust against attacks and against loss. So how do you actually lose funds in a multisig, in a 2 of 3 multisig scenario? First way would be for an attacker to get 2 keys or 2 of your backups and also the wallet information. So that's a hell of a lot of information to lose, at least 3 pieces of information that should be geographically separated. So if they got 2 of your private keys or their backups and the wallet information, they could find the addresses, they could find the Bitcoin, and they could sign for it. That's loss. The attacker could get 2 keys or backups and corrupt a third party that had state, that, that could be a website that you're using or a product that you're using, and that state meant that it knew about your wallet, and therefore those private keys were enough to, so that would be something like, infiltrating your account system in Unchained or something like that, and also getting 2 private keys and also getting through the video verification or something like that. It still could happen, right? It's still something for you to think about, but that would be a loss scenario. Now, outside of the attacking realm, what happens, if it's just human error? The human error required here would be to lose 2 of your private keys and their backups, to lose 1 of the private keys and the backup and the wallet information. That you couldn't recreate that wallet information. Lose the wallet information and have no way to recover it with a collaborator. It's actually the closest thing that we get to a narrow use case of Bitcoin loss, is losing that information. So, quick summary. It's still really early for multisig, but I hope what I've tried to do here is convince you that it's much more robust than single sig scenarios. You can retain self-sovereignty, and that you should probably get off your ass and start looking at it a little bit. There's a lot of free things out there. There's a lot of companies doing this. Electrum, Caravan, things like that. It's worth playing around with and trying out. That, if I didn't repeat it enough, that wallet information was the least intuitive thing for me that I wish people had talked to me about when I first started out, and that you should protect it like you would your private keys. It is very important. And that collaboration with other people in multisig is not just compatible with trust minimization, but it is also something that brings out sort of the native, it is a native feature of how Bitcoin works at the protocol level. Cool. Any questions?
So, listen, this isn't really a question, but I think this is very significant just to say this, because it's very significant in the history of Bitcoin.
Okay.
I want to tell you my experience. Okay. I want to tell you my experience using Caravan Multisig, and it's very significant because I'll get to it. So for some reason, people really like betting the infamous American HODL about what the price of Bitcoin will be at a certain date. I don't know why, because he's already won 2 of 3 bets, and I'm pretty sure he's going to win 3 of 3. Okay, but how do you bet someone on Twitter? You don't know who they are. They're completely anonymous. So what we did is we used Caravan, and American HODL decided to use me as the 3rd key. And then American HODL had 1 key, and then the guy that, I don't know why, decided to bet American HODL had the 2nd key. So it was so significant because I think for the first time in human history, you were able to make a bet completely anonymously without using a third party, without knowing the people's names, and it was just all seamless. And then when the date hit, that, of course, American HODL won the bet. If the bettor didn't want to sign, he had me as the third party to sign, and we all did that using Caravan, which made that whole setting up that whole multi-sig experience extremely easy. So I love what you guys are doing.
Awesome. I'm glad that worked. To be clear, we didn't build Caravan to become bookies or anything like that, but I'm glad it works for that use case. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. It was phenomenal. One of the questions that I have is, especially given your background at a Stack Exchange and so forth, is there a best place where the discussions around these things are happening for example, pre-product launch, right? Where a forum or something like that where people can go to for more resources?
Oh yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The Bitcoin Stack Exchange is phenomenal. I think it's this hidden, I'm going to show my old company now. It's this little hidden gem in Bitcoin that I'm not sure everyone really knows about. They might go to Stack Overflow, and there's some Bitcoin questions there, but everything's off topic on Stack Overflow, as you know, and it gets closed in a second. So the Bitcoin Stack Exchange is much more open, and the level, the quality of answers and the quality of people answering there is incredible. And a lot of the technical discussions are coming from people trying to build these products for the first time. So you get sort of an insight into how the technology works at a very, very low level, before there's an obvious application for it. So I find the Bitcoin Stack Exchange to be incredible. I also pay attention to Bitcoin Optech, one of the best newsletters out there. They do some highlights of the Bitcoin Stack Exchange, but I can usually find out about something, a conversation that I know is going to affect me in 3 or 4 months on Bitcoin. If I look back in my history, Bitcoin Optech was talking about it 3 or 4 months ago.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. When people think about backing up their seed, they think of like a steel device and they bury it or whatever. Is there anything like that for the wallet information? Any steel providers, or are people just printing out their wallet information and storing it in like a safety deposit box?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So like when I think about the wallet information, it's a personal choice of how you do this. So it's just 3 XPub and 2 of 3 again. It's just 3 XPubs and a BIP32 paths, right? So how can you do that? Like, some people might put it into an encrypted file on their computer. Some people might do a password manager or something like that, because they're trying to calculate what are the repercussions of someone getting this from me. And the repercussions of someone getting that is they know the balance of it. Now, do they even know that it's yours when they get it? Like, who knows? So there is privacy that you give up when you lose that information. I don't know of any like physical products like a crypto steel that is made to back up XPubs and BIP32 paths, but get creative, right? Like, it's a small amount of information, and you could do everything from putting it. I mean, you could. Some of those crypto steel type things, you can chisel stuff in. You can chisel this in just as easily as you can 24 words, right? So, I mean, I want to, reiterate like how important the information is, but, depending on how much money it's securing and things like that, maybe a password manager is an okay place. Maybe an encrypted file on your computer is an okay place. Maybe printing it out, putting it into a safe is an okay place. Again, you have to make that determination for yourself, but not aware of a specific product.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, one of the biggest fears you have in life is losing your private keys, right? Mm-hmm. And up until this point, I was thinking multisig was just one more vulnerability because you don't know if you'll ever have geographic access to it, that kind of stuff. From your presentation, it's almost like you could publish one of your private keys on Twitter.
Yeah, what are the repercussions? The Twitter mob can get a hold of that key and they can't do shit with it.
But if I go to another country, I can log into Twitter and it's right there. And as long as I have the other keys, I mean, that...
It's kind of weird, right? Yeah.
Okay.
No, you read it right.
Hey, so something I hear a lot, when people are talking about multisig is that, complexity is the enemy of security.
Sure.
And, when you're talking about if you have, let's say, a 2 of 3, you've got 3 keys and you've got 3 backups and you've got your wallet info, that's 7 things to keep secure. And I understand you could lose some of them. And if you bump that up to a 3 of 5, you're up to 11 things to keep secure.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you could speak to how you guys think about, like, where to draw that line, and when is, when is it too complicated for your own good, potentially?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, obviously it's subjective. It's a personal preference. And there are people that would never collaborate with anyone. That's fine, right? They're going to have to store more information on their own if they're using multisig if they don't collaborate with anyone. It's where I made the personal determination when I saw stuff like Unchained and Casa and products like that, that seemed like a good balance. Some people might not see that as a good balance. I think that you have to look at your own personal situation. And really it comes down to how many secure locations can you secure, right? And you look at what is reasonable for you in your life that you feel comfortable with. You think about the scenarios that I just walked through. Oh, I'm being played off. Yeah. And I'll talk to you more about it.
Thank you. Old, huh? No wonder I didn't recognize him last night, not ever meeting him before. So hopefully they'll get this music and my thing figured out in a second. Okay, testing. Okay, next contest. Piggy Polo goes to Eric Mills. Inventing Bitcoin by Jan Pritzer to Anthony Roning. And I assume they're working on that sound back there. BitBlockBOOM t-shirt to Chuck Bell. Sats Ledger to John Mitchell. A coin kite patch to David Duncan. And Tone, just take a second. You don't have to rush in and speak, but Tone Base is next. Good guy, great conference in Confiscated Vegas I told you about. He's going to talk about why only Bitcoin can be considered sufficiently decentralized. And you can just wait a second for us to get rid of this music if you want.
That's okay.
Okay, or you can talk over it. Oh, thanks. You want to get his, he's going to go ahead and talk to you, get his mic on.
Before, oh, okay, now it's working. Okay. All right, cool.
Right on, man.
All right. All right. Man, I hope the live stream doesn't get shut down. That's what happens when you play like copyrighted music over a live stream. I've had that issue. Learned the lesson. All right, hey everyone, thank you for coming out. It's awesome. It drew a pretty big crowd, Gary. Great job. I guess people were very, very happy to leave their quarantine zone for some human interaction. Really important. I know I'm having a great time. All right. Is that full screen? Let me see. All right, guess it is. All right, cool. All right, everyone. I can talk over the music. It's up to the event organizers and I guess show of hands. Do we want to wait? Do we want to start? We can start. All right, and it's over. Perfect. All right, hey everyone. Gary, thank you again for the invite. I had a great time here last year and was happy to come back. And thank you everyone for coming out. My name is Tone Vase. You may have seen me on YouTube or at some other conferences. There's really no reason to talk about myself. So we're just going to move on with the presentation. I do organize several conferences myself. One of them is Unconfiscatable that Gary keeps mentioning. Thank you so much for that. Probably my biggest promoter. And we also have Understanding Bitcoin in Malta and something more for the traders in the audience, the Financial Summit that has now been canceled for the second time, the Dominican Republic and Bali, but we will be back in Bali at the least. All right, there we go. All right, so what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about decentralization. And I had this idea for a little while to just discuss it because everyone is just throwing this word around. And I guess the final trigger that caused me to say, you know what, I need to write an article because I only write maybe 2 articles a year, just not my specialty. That's why I do YouTube videos. And we need to talk about decentralization. And I guess the trigger for that is I saw a giant Cointelegraph article. I think I mentioned Charles Hoskinson a little too much, where he says that Cardano is more decentralized than Bitcoin. And that was just, no, that's insane. How can that be possible? And this is where I wanted to talk about what does decentralization mean. And I've been reading a bunch of articles, and articles from Parker Lewis, Arancha and Capital, were very, very good. as far as talking about like why Bitcoin can be stopped and why it can be copied, but I wanted to specifically focus on the word decentralization. So to me, what makes Bitcoin sufficiently decentralized is the fact that it has 3 independent levels of decentralization, and we're going to talk about all 3 of them. One of them is the code, one of them is mining, and one of them is nodes. They are 3 independent parts. And for me, in order to consider a project to be sufficiently decentralized, I don't like using the word decentralized because there's no line. It's always a gray line. There's no end to it. You can always get more decentralized. You can always be less decentralized, but is it sufficient enough? So each of these 3 parts of the Bitcoin ecosystem need to be sufficiently decentralized in order to really be considered sufficiently decentralized. So we're going to go through them one by one. The first one I want to focus on is code, and they are in no particular order. No one part of these 3 is more necessary to the system than the other. And this is the beauty of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, is that not one of these is takes priority over the others. So we're going to start with code because that's kind of how Bitcoin started. And what does it mean for the code to be decentralized? That goes back to the Bitcoin core developers. The way code is written, the way code is reviewed, the way it's decided upon which code is going to be part of the next release of the next client. And unfortunately, almost no one is doing statistics on what is going on in the code, which developers are coding which lines. All the information is there. It is all on GitHub. But the first picture, the first representation of it that came out was all the way back in 2016. So if you see the picture on the left there, that's the 2016 of which core developers have written and committed how much code. And you can see how Peter Willa is all the way at the top. And this was already the coding of SegWit, which was mostly Peter Willa and Gregory Maxwell working on that. And you can still see Nakamoto's code. He's up there at number 4. You see Gavin Andreessen is now way lower because this is now 4 years ago. It's amazing how that picture is from 4 years ago. And there was almost no one doing research analysis on this, but recently, about a year ago, there was another article published on that, and you can see that over on the right side, and this is Bitcoin's top 20 developers, but that's just top 20. There's a lot more than that, and you can see that now Vladimir Vanderland is basically has the majority of the code that was written. You still see Satoshi's code. That's that little purple band. And then there's also a concept of developer effort, which is how much of your work is actually also being overwritten and removed because there are updates. And the majority of that code has been written. And this is very, very important, and a lot of people underestimate the effort that it takes to write Bitcoin. And you see the names, and you should be able to recognize some of those names if you've been in Bitcoin for 3 to 4 years. And if you don't, you should. You really should know who the core developers are. I know there's no altcoin fans in this audience, but if I was doing this presentation at more of a shitcoin conference, I would say, can you name more than 5 core developers of your code? And I highly doubt anybody would, okay? Because I can usually name maybe 1 or 2 developers at some of the very popular altcoin projects, but that's as far as it goes. But in Bitcoin, you can be naming them all day. In fact, this was the comparison of how many core developers contributed to the Bitcoin Core Client 0.14. This was the SegWit. This was the SegWit Core Client, and then you had Bitcoin Unlimited, which became Bitcoin Cash, that spun off because they didn't like it. And there's their list of developers on that project. And I know some of those guys, and I'm like, I don't know how much of a developers they are. You can look at Bitcoin error log right there, who got his, that's John Carvalho, Bitcoin error log, the big troll of Bcash, and he got on that list by fixing some grammar, and then he kind of made sure, hey, I want to be on that list. So this is the big difference of how many developers are actually looking at your code and making sure that all the bugs are fixed. And it's also becoming very challenging to say who is and isn't a Bitcoin Core developer. Oh, is anyone at the computer? I have a menu that I'm now controlling. There you go. Thank you. And it's becoming hard to say who is a Bitcoin Core developer and who isn't, because Bitcoin is just a base layer. And the protocol is getting really, really advanced with second layer solution and what is being built on top of it. So thank you, Lucas Nuzzi, for this graphic. It's from an article called Bitcoin's Technology Stack. And it was also very good. Just talked about all of the innovation that has taken place on top of Bitcoin and all these second layer solutions. So if you're only working on Lightning, are you a Bitcoin Core developer or not? So this is the other thing to try and explain to people, that Bitcoin is just a foundation. You have all of these layers being built on top. And I can't wait. And a lot of them are being built out at the same time. And that's why when people say, well, when is Lightning coming? When is this coming? But all of this is going to hit. And it's all good, and I'm expecting it to be functioning very, very well. And it's all going to hit at the right time when we really, really need it. I know I always say that I'm half embarrassed to say that I don't really use Lightning all that much, but I haven't needed to. The Bitcoin on-chain transactions have been pretty cheap, and they've been pretty fast. A little less so lately. But that's on my to-do list right now. Quarantine is still on. To get my Lightning game up, because I think next year, when the price of Bitcoin does rise, and the moment we even come close to the old all-time high, I think everyone's going to have to use Lightning if you want your transactions to be fast, cheap, and more private. So a lot of innovation is coming, and I don't understand how any other projects can claim that the code of their project is sufficiently decentralized. I believe that's a challenge, because you can name 1 or 2 developers and it kind of ends. And if your altcoin can hard fork because one guy wants to hard fork, that's not a decentralized coding effort. So that's my view on it. Or the nodes believe the coders and everything they say, which we're going to get to in a minute. All right, so let's move on to part 2. So the second part of what makes Bitcoin decentralized is mining. And Guy Swan talked about this earlier in his presentation, which was great. This is awesome. Like the people that spoke, and BTC Pay server, been using it for about 2 years through my website. So that's great. So, and of course, we'll call a Multisig and Jimmy Song. So the presentation has been awesome. But Guy Swan talked about mining, and Bitcoin mining is, now that I have a statistic, is as much as the country of Switzerland, or we've passed Switzerland. And eventually it will come up. I can't wait till Bitcoin mining uses more energy than it's in the top 10 of all the countries. So that's what we're looking forward to. And anyone can join the mining game. The barrier to entry is not simple, but anyone can do it. You don't need a license. You just need to understand mining. You need to have access to the equipment, and you need to understand how to minimize your cost with the electricity cost. And a lot of people love to demonize Bitcoin. This is I've debated Nouriel Roubini, and it's very, very frustrating. When he sits there and says, Bitcoin is centralized because all the mining is done in China. And that's just incorrect on so many levels. Because first of all, mining being centralized doesn't make Bitcoin centralized. He's forgetting about the coding effort, which I just already explained, and doesn't even understand the concept of a node, which I haven't even gotten to yet in this presentation. And mining isn't done by single peers anymore. It's done in pools, and anyone can join, enter, and exit the pool. And mining in China isn't as big as it was before, and even if it was big, that's still okay, because the user-activated soft fork proved that miners are not in control. They have a job, and it's a very, very important job. Very important job to keep Bitcoin decentralized. But the pool operator still has a lot of theoretical control over what happens. But that's because everyone is still running Stratum version 1 in their pool software when a block is found. And that is what Brains is trying to change, which is it's probably going to happen on slush pool first. And that would give the individual miner inside the pool more power as to, or more say as to how that block is being structured. So now, if every single pool adopts the new, basically the new code to how to structure that block, then the picture would look more like the one on the right, where even though it doesn't matter what pool you're in, you're still in control, and the pool doesn't have this centralized aspect to the mining. And mining does play a crucial role because it decentralizes for the third time. And this is what's weird, how projects that don't even have mining try to claim that they are more decentralized than a project that does. Because they just eliminated an entire third to maximize your sufficient decentralization. And we saw lots of shady things happening in the mining space, mostly on lesser altcoins. And there was a lawsuit going on now, again, with our favorite punching bag, Bcash, where rumor had it that the hash rate from the bitcoins.com mining pool was used to defend the split versus Craig Wright, because Craig Wright had more hashing power on that chain. They also were able to put, what do you call them, like stop the code from being updated. There was checkpoints into the code. So everything just went centralized in order to protect your blockchain, which is not how it's supposed to work. So mining is certainly gonna get better. And here's a look at some of the other tokens that are proof of work as well. And you can see how everything but Bitcoin, we have Bitcoin in the upper left, and you can see everything but Bitcoin can basically, you have a 51% attack with just 3 miners. Now, a 51% attack is a whole other thing we can talk about all day. But it's very, very challenging to do a 51% attack in Bitcoin because of game theory. It's very easy to do a 51% attack on an altcoin. Ethereum Classic is not even on this list. They just had a 51% attack. And the reason why it was easy, one of the reasons is because there's not that much hash power on it, so it doesn't cost you much to acquire 51% of the hash rate. But the bigger aspect of why it can happen is because you have another coin you can move into. And you're going to attack it through an exchange. You're going to double spend the exchange. But you can move that money into Bitcoin. If you try to 51% attack Bitcoin, where are you going to move your money to? What is your exit point? Right? How do you get it out? You can try and get it through the bank, but that's not going to end well for you. So there's a lot more things that protect Bitcoin from a 51% attack than the theory of, oh, I'll just have enough hashing power. Like, okay, how do you get the money out? It's like, hey, I just snuck into the gold vault of the Federal Reserve. Okay, how do I get the gold out? That's the other problem. And now, by just glancing at this real quick, Litecoin is still doing okay, and Ethereum is actually not doing too bad. They have a domination. They have 2 of the pools. One of them is probably unknown. I'm not a big fan of, it's a double-edged sword. If you have a big chunk that is unknown, so you don't know who's mining it. On the one hand, it's good. It's anonymous. You don't have to, no one has to know who's mining it. But then if like 80% of your mining is being done as unknown, you really don't know if it's a single miner that could attack the coin. And again, it doesn't make sense to attack it if that's the highest level coin like Bitcoin. But if it's not, it certainly will get attacked at some point. And the irony is that if we look at Ethereum, which I was going to talk about at the end, but if we look at Ethereum, they have the same three aspects. You have nodes, you have miners, and you have the code. Well, it's pretty obvious that the coding is fairly centralized, even though they claim they have more developers. But it's not about the quantity. And some other projects, going back to the code part, it's not about the quantity of your developers. Do you want as many as possible? And it's definitely about the quality of your developers, but I'm sure there is some altcoin project out there that says, we have the smartest engineer in the world. Yeah, but it's the combination of quality and quantity. If you have one amazing smart guy, okay, that's great. And if you have 18,000 coders that no one's ever heard of, that's okay. But that combination of quality and quantity is what separates Bitcoin from the rest. And Ethereum's mining is actually pretty decentralized. But guess what they want to do? They want to go proof of stake, which just baffles the mind. They're going proof of stake because they understand that the way they're mining is not going to last in the long term. But it's just, to me, that's funny that that's out of the three things, as hard as it is to run a node, and you can read Stop and Decrypt articles for that, their nodes are way more centralized, full archive nodes. And their coding is centralized. The only aspect of their chain is decentralized as mining, and that's what they're looking to get rid of, which I find incredibly comical. All right, so let's move on to the last part. I have about 6 minutes left, and that's the nodes. So this is the one way that someone like myself can actually participate. Yeah, I run one miner, but that's more of a hobby. I can't really as having the most updated and the most recent version of the code is because a lot of people, while they take some time to create that node, they don't pay enough attention to it to keep it updated. But here's the worst part. This is a May 2019 graphic that shows close to 100,000 nodes. Here's the picture I took a few days ago. And this graphic, and if you just add those up, that's about 12,000, 12,000, 12,000, it's about 37, plus 5,000 of actual latest software updated nodes. And where the prior graphic, if I have them next to each other, that was 26,000 in green, 1,000 in green. And if you add up all the nodes on the left-hand side, that's closer to 50,000. So according to Luke Dash Jr., we lost about 50,000 nodes in the last year. And again, this is really, really important that enough people, and 50,000 nodes is sufficiently decentralized, but look, the area that has outdated code is also growing. And this is a little bit unfortunate, and hopefully, like Start 9 was doing their demo, and more projects will come out that will help people take sovereignty of their nodes to make that system that part of Bitcoin's decentralization more decentralized. And the craziest part was in 2017 during the hard fork wars, where the big blockers actually tried to convince you that we need a bigger block. Not only would that have split the network, but we're seeing the effects, and this is why Luke Dash Jr. is trying to push for a smaller block size, because he sees this as the initial barrier to entry. Because if you want to have a full archival node, you now have to download 300 gigs of data. And that's still growing right now. This is why things like Ethereum and EOS, they can't even compete on nodes. Their blockchains are 3, 4, 5 terabytes of size now. And you see the difference in this year, from May 2019 to August of this year. The blockchain went up by about, I think, 100 gigs. It went from 200 to 300. And that's already feels like it's becoming a barrier to entry. So there needs to be a way to keep Bitcoin nodes sufficiently decentralized, because that's a major 1/3. And the majority of all these Bitcoin nodes are Bitcoin Core client. Just a few people are still running all this other nonsense, which there's no need to get into. So to me, it's still pretty clear that each of these 3 parts is individually sufficiently decentralized for a decentralized network like Bitcoin. And you still not only have to take over one of these parts, you have to control the majority of the nodes. You have to control the majority of the mining. You have to be the dictator of the Bitcoin code. And probably at least 2 of these parts of the triangle have to be done by the same entity or the same person. And then, only then, can someone claim that Bitcoin is more centralized than sufficiently decentralized. And if this was my presentation here last year, and if we look at this 4-part insanity of the altcoins, just think about it. Just grab any altcoin project you can think of, and think of it from those 3 aspects. Nodes that validate the transactions, miners that order those transactions and process them and earn the reward, and the coders. How decentralized is your project from those 3 elements? And you'll have your answer fairly quick the moment you start doing some research on each of those 3 parts individually. And if one of those 3 parts is missing, which is usually the mining part, it's pretty much over. Because by not having mining, all of a sudden, the amount of coins you have adds to the centralization or decentralization of the network. So that's the beauty of it. In Bitcoin, it doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how many Bitcoins you have. You can be Satoshi with 1 million Bitcoin. You can be Roger Ver with over 100,000 Bitcoin. They do not control those 3 parts. But if you're a proof of stake system, the richer you are, the more control you have. That's not a world I want to see in the future. So thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed this presentation. And looking forward to coming back next year. All right, 5 minutes for questions, guys.
Thanks very much, man. That was awesome. This is all about decentralization in every single way, and I just love that stuff. I have a question. I want to get your thoughts on a subtlety about node version running. I'm of the opinion, and I get in arguments sometimes, that we should not all update in sync to the latest version. If you remember the inflation bug, if we had all updated to that same version and the bug actually took place, it would have sucked. We would have relied on the people that didn't update in order to tell us what the consensus should have been. So I kind of see a variety and diversity of node versions as another form of decentralization, but I know there's also another argument for updating. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. It does sound very, very reasonable, but at the same time, you shouldn't be, let's say, 5 versions behind. Okay. All right, so I guess you can take that view. I mean, I hate doing updates on anything, on my phones, on my apps.
Yeah, me
and
too.
And when I do, I tend to skip a lot.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily a bad idea if everyone just skips. Hey, you know what? I didn't do the latest update, and I didn't do the update after that, but now it's time for me to hop. So if people do these hops, I think that would be a good scenario that you're describing.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Tone, longtime viewer of the channel and big fan here. So what do you attribute that loss of nodes to, the amount that is? And also with quality SPV wallets like Green Address, Samurai, and the hardware wallets, how is that number ever going to go up? What is the need for that?
Yeah, so I actually didn't know that jump happened until like a few days ago when I was doing research for the presentation. So that actually scared me a little bit. I'm like, holy shit, that we just lost like half the nodes. Because BitNodes is showing you pretty much the same number. It's always been around 10,000. But the Luke Dash Jr. graphic is significantly different, and then you're seeing these like, you know, the oldest versions of nodes just like expand based on percentage. I don't know what I can contribute that to. I guess, I think the biggest factor is comfort and a little bit of laziness. People were really adamant about defending Bitcoin in 2017 with the user-activated soft fork. And then it kind of died down, so everyone relaxed a little bit. So maybe that was a really good thing. It got people very, very interested. I mean, like I fired up my node. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the drop happened. I don't think it's the fact that the blockchain is too big in size yet, though that is a future concern. But on the other question that you mentioned, which was, what was the second part?
How is it going to increase?
Oh, increase, yes. So these nodes, like that was the push for wallets. So you should be able to run your node, and then your SPV wallet, like it's actually connecting to your node that you have running. That was another thing that became popular in 2017. So I think every wallet, and I believe Blockstream Green has that, and all of them do, where you can actually input your own node location, and then you can go still through your own node. And we'll start 9. I was at the demo last night, and again, you create a prune node, and off of the archival node, and you can use your own node for that. All right, last question.
Hey, Tone. So one quick question. I want to see if you can help me to understand something that apparently I just learned this week. And it needs to be somebody like you to explain it, because you have a strong reputation in Bitcoin. And for example, I don't. So because I don't have a reputation in Bitcoin, if I were to, looking at that last graph you showed with all the ICOs, you know, if I were to create my own ICO on a shitcoin, meaning that it's centralized, right, like Ethereum, then by default that makes it a shitcoin. But if somebody like you with a strong reputation in Bitcoin creates a shitcoin in Ethereum, that somehow makes it like not like your mama's ICO. How does your reputation in Bitcoin translate into making an ICO in Ethereum be like a real, like non-shitcoin? I have trouble understanding that. Apparently, that's something that's just come up recently. So if you were to make an ICO, what would you do to make it like be a not shitcoin?
I mean, this is what's referred to as an affinity scam, which is where you build a reputation, you have a reputation, and then you just may not even burn that reputation. You burn that reputation to some, but you sucker everybody in. This is the the Richard Hart model, basically. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and that's the thing. There's multiple levels to that. An ICO on Ethereum basically tells me that you're using an unsecure bottom layer. If you built that ICO on top of, say, Bitcoin, Liquid, or RGB, you can build your shitcoin on top of Bitcoin. It doesn't change that from being a shitcoin. It just means you were smarter about the underlying layer. It's it doesn't change the outcome of it, but at least you're smarter about the underlying tech. So that's kind of my view on it. So the concept of these utility tokens need to be publicly traded for to discover a value is crazy. All right, guys, I'm standing between you and lunch, so probably good to wrap it up so everybody can eat. Thank you.
Before we go, I want to make sure y'all know about in your bags. There's a sheet. Looks like this probably. This is for a discount for next year's event. This is only good for 2 weeks. It's a very great discount. We did it last year. You have till July the 1st to cancel if you decide not to use this. And this is only for the people who are here. Okay? So I just want to make sure you know that. We got till 1:30 to get back, and Parker Lewis is starting then. I'd get here early because that's going to be a really good talk. See you guys at 1:30.
Oh, cool.
Disconnecting.
Not my forte. Hey guys.
There you go.
I used to run my own note and I don't.
Thanks. Good job. Yeah, I thought it was really good, as a matter of fact. It was very educational. Yeah. Yeah, he kind of like said, it's time to go eat, so people were starting to leave.
Yeah,
He kind of
I
went,
think people got the message.
Yeah.
I can put it up first when you come back, and if you want, you could announce it again.
yeah, we'll do that.
And then I'm gonna we've lost our camera 4. I think someone just put their chair on it, so I'm gonna try and get that fixed before everybody.
What was camera 4 at?
It's the live feed of this. So right now on the live stream, if he wants to show the slides, it's a picture of a picture versus an actual feed off the computer. And we're not sure why it shut off, but I'm going to try and figure that out. And then
We're good. It was a good time for break then.
Yeah, we'll be back on track.
Okay.
That's why I was crawling around up front if you saw. And I don't know.
I did.
Everybody gets one, but I had
Something else. Sit on there.
What do you mean?
Is there something else to sit on?
Oh yeah, I can change it to Parker Lewis.
Now just go put in here. You're reminded about pre-order tickets. So
I got my one fuck up. I put my head against the button.